Have you ever imagined strapping yourself to a roaring engine thousands of feet in the air, with barely a lawn chair to sit on? Or what about piloting an aircraft where you are entirely swallowed up inside the wing itself? Welcome to the wild, untamed world of experimental home-built aviation. This is where American garage geniuses turn crazy ideas into flying realities. Now, if you love incredible aviation engineering and amazing flying machines, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Today we are counting down the 10 strangest home-built aircraft cockpits ever constructed. Stay with me until the very end, because our number one spot looks like a geometric anomaly. Kicking off our list at number 10 is the Titan T-51 Mustang, a glorious three-quarter scale replica of the legendary World War II fighter. Designed in the early 2000s, this aircraft is celebrated for packing an immense amount of power into a scaled-down airframe. It weighs just under 1,650 pounds. Builders often equip these beasts with massive roaring V6 or even V8 engines. This produces a guttural, ground-shaking exhaust note. It sounds like pure American muscle tearing through the sky at speeds topping 150 miles per hour. The visual experience of the T-51 cockpit, however, is where the reality of scaling down a fighter plane hits you hard. Imagine trying to squeeze into a space that is significantly tighter than the backseat of a classic Ford F-150 pickup truck. It is a tandem setup, meaning the passenger sits directly behind the pilot, and once that bubble canopy slides shut, the claustrophobia is incredibly real. You are practically wearing the airplane. You are surrounded by a dizzying array of switches, dials, and a control stick that sits firmly between your knees. Building one of these miniature warbirds is a huge commitment. It often demands over 1,500 hours of grueling labor in a home garage and a budget that can easily exceed $50,000. It is a true testament to the dedication of DIY builders who want that authentic fighter pilot experience without spending millions. But if you think squeezing into a scaled-down fighter is an intense way to fly, wait until you see an aircraft that completely rethinks where a plane belongs in the first place. Coming in at number 9 is the Sea Ray, an incredibly popular amphibious experimental aircraft that has been turning heads since the 1990s. Powered typically by a reliable buzzing Rotax engine, pushing around 115 horsepower, the Sea Ray is not built for breaking sound barriers. Instead, it is built for absolute freedom, cruising comfortably at around 100 miles per hour. This high-wing pusher propeller configuration allows pilots to explore remote lakes and rivers, places that traditional land-based aircraft could not even dream of touching. What makes the Sea Ray cockpit so unusual is its hull-integrated seating that makes you feel exactly like you're sitting inside a sleek flying speedboat. The sliding canopy can be locked open in flight. This lets the wind rush past you as you skim just feet above the water. Because the cockpit essentially sits inside a buoyant fiberglass hull weighing roughly 1,000 pounds empty, the danger factor is mitigated. If things go wrong, you already have a boat ready to make a safe and stable splashdown. The do-it-yourself community absolutely loves this machine. They pour roughly 1,000 hours of labor and around $40,000 into turning a pile of parts into a versatile adventure craft. It is a brilliant crossover between marine and aeronautical engineering. This has built a massive cult following among weekend adventurers across the country. But if this amphibious design seems like a logical, safe choice for a flying boat, our next water-capable aircraft takes a much more aggressive, top-heavy approach to engine placement and overall design. At number 8, we have the Seawind 300C, a remarkably sleek, high-performance amphibian that looks like it flew straight out of a futuristic spy movie. Originally developed in the 1980s, this aircraft boasts some serious muscle, often utilizing a massive 300 horsepower engine. It is built for speed and range. It is designed to haul a maximum takeoff weight of 3,400 pounds across the country at speeds exceeding 160 miles per hour, and then land smoothly on a pristine mountain lake. The most striking, downright bizarre feature of the Seawind cockpit is looking up through the expansive canopy and realizing there is a massive engine mounted directly above your head. It is integrated right into the front of the towering tail fin. This creates an incredibly unique visual profile, but it also introduces a serious center of gravity danger factor. Having hundreds of pounds of hot metal positioned so high above the fuselage dramatically alters the aircraft handling. It requires absolute precision during water landings to avoid flipping over. Here is a question for the seasoned mechanics and engineers watching. Would you feel completely comfortable strapping your family into a cockpit with a 300 horsepower engine positioned directly above your heads? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Requiring over 2,000 hours of complex fiberglass fabrication, it is a masterpiece of aerodynamic styling that requires a brave pilot. Yet, if a heavy overhead engine makes you nervous, you definitely will not be prepared for an aircraft that strips away the modern fuselage entirely. Number 7 brings us the Little Wing Autogyro, a mesmerizing throwback to the golden age of rotary flight. Designed by Ron Herron, this modern interpretation of the classic autogyros from the 1930s utilizes a tractor engine configuration. This means the engine is mounted at the front. It pulls the lightweight frame forward, while the unpowered overhead rotor blades spin purely via wind autorotation. Powered by anything from a modified automotive engine to a retro radial setup, it is a brilliant exercise in vintage mechanical engineering that demands to be flown low and slow. Sitting in the cockpit of the Little Wing is the closest you will ever get to riding a classic vintage tractor thousands of feet in the sky. The pilot sits in a heavily exposed tub-like open cockpit right behind the roaring front engine, and a massive control stick drops down between their legs. There are no advanced digital displays here, just raw steel cables, exposed tubing, and the wind whipping violently at your face, giving you a completely unfiltered view of the world rushing past below. Constructing this beautiful piece of functional art can take a dedicated builder over 1,200 hours of intense metal welding. It keeps the budget relatively low at around $20,000. One veteran pilot perfectly summarized the experience by stating, "Flying the Little Wing is less like piloting an airplane and more like wrestling a mechanical bull in a hurricane. It is raw and utterly exhilarating." But if you think that open tub is exposed, our next aircraft removes almost every barrier between you and the open sky. Swooping into the number 6 spot is the Pterodactyl Ascender, a legendary ultralight aircraft from the late 1970s that helped kickstart the affordable DIY flight movement. This is bare-bones aviation at its absolute finest. It utilizes a sweeping tailless wing design, powered by a small screaming two-stroke engine mounted at the rear. With just enough horsepower to keep its lightweight 250-pound airframe aloft, the Ascender is defined by the high-pitched weed-whacker-like buzz of its engine as it slowly claws its way into the air at 45 miles per hour. The cockpit, if you can even call it that, is an extreme exercise in minimalism and an absolute lack of protection. The pilot is strapped into a completely exposed, sling-style seat hanging rigidly underneath the brightly colored Dacron wing. Their legs dangle freely in the open air. There is no floor, there are no walls, and there is zero crash protection. If you make a mistake on a hard landing, your work boots are the very first things to hit the dirt, making the safety factor practically non-existent. Despite the obvious physical dangers, the Ascender built a massive cult following. It offered the purest, cheapest form of flight for just a few $1,000s and a weekend of assembly time. It represents the fearless, pioneering spirit of early ultralight enthusiasts who just wanted to touch the clouds on a blue-collar budget. Now, if you are enjoying this deep dive into the wildest creations of the aviation world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let us get back to the countdown with a bizarre high-tech pod. At number 5 is the CFM Shadow, an incredibly peculiar aircraft originating from the United Kingdom. It looks exactly like a futuristic pod suspended from a parachute wing. Designed for extreme aerodynamic stability and stall resistance, the Shadow uses a tandem seat configuration. This is housed in a tiny, streamlined fiberglass fuselage weighing roughly 850 pounds when fully loaded. It is powered by a reliable pusher engine mounted high behind the wing, allowing for exceptional fuel economy and surprisingly agile flight characteristics at speeds around 85 miles per hour. Looking at the CFM Shadow cockpit, you cannot help but feel like you are stepping into a high-tech flying canoe. The pilot sits up front in a tight, narrow enclosure with exceptional downward visibility. Meanwhile, the passenger sits closely behind, straddling the seat like they are riding a motorcycle. The instrument panel is incredibly compact, and because the engine is pushing from behind, the front of the aircraft is entirely devoid of spinning props or exhaust heat. This offers an eerily quiet and completely unobstructed view of the horizon. This bizarre setup brings up a massive debate in the experimental aircraft community. Do you prefer the unobstructed view of a pusher configuration or the traditional pulling power of a tractor engine up front? Let me know which side you take in the comments. Taking about 800 hours to build, the Shadow proves that weird designs can actually be incredibly efficient. However, if we are talking about revolutionary rule-breaking configurations, we absolutely have to talk about the radical genius of designer Rutan. Taking the number 4 spot is the iconic Rutan Defiant, a twin-engine push-pull canard aircraft that looks completely alien even decades after its creation. Designed by the legendary Rutan, the Defiant was built to completely eliminate the terrifying aerodynamic dangers of a traditional twin-engine failure. By placing one engine at the very front and one at the very rear along the center axis, the aircraft maintains perfect centerline thrust. This means if one engine suddenly dies, the plane will not violently pull to one side, keeping the pilot completely safe. The cockpit of the Defiant is an absolute masterclass in futuristic geometric design. Sandwiched between the pulling front propeller and the pushing rear propeller, the cabin is heavily angled and entirely devoid of a traditional front-mounted horizontal tail. Sitting inside feels exactly like piloting a starfighter. The swept-back canard wing up front dances in your peripheral vision, and the thick canopy framing gives it the heavy, robust feel of a space capsule rather than a typical garage-built airplane. It comfortably cruises at 200 miles per hour. Building a Defiant requires an astounding level of dedication. It demands over 3,000 hours of complex fiberglass composite work and a budget nearing $100,000 for twin engines. It represents the absolute pinnacle of the relentless American DIY spirit, pushing boundaries that factories would not dare touch. But as advanced and aerodynamically safe as the Defiant aimed to be, our next aircraft on the list is a historical nightmare that threw safety entirely out the window in the blind pursuit of absolute straight-line speed. At number 3, we travel back to the golden age of air racing to look at the terrifying GB Model R and Model Z replicas. Originally built in the 1930s by the Granville brothers, these planes were essentially the biggest, most aggressive radial engines engineers could find, bolted onto the smallest possible airframe. The deafening, chest-pounding roar of that massive 9-cylinder radial engine is enough to rattle your teeth. It generates unbelievable horsepower, designed purely to blast past 300 miles per hour on the racetrack. The cockpit configuration of the GB is notoriously one of the most dangerous and visually absurd setups in aviation history. To offset the immense weight of the front engine, the pilot is shoved into a tiny, cramped box at the extreme rear of the teardrop-shaped fuselage. They are sitting practically on top of the vertical stabilizer. Because of the massive engine cowling blocking the front, the pilot has absolutely zero forward visibility on the ground. They are forced to look out the side windows just to guess where the runway is. A famous test pilot once noted that flying a GB was exactly like balancing a pencil on your finger during a hurricane. It required immense physical strength, split-second reflexes, and nerves of absolute steel. Build costs for modern flying replicas reach well over $200,000 and thousands of labor hours. It is a beautiful, deadly piece of mechanical history. But, if you think that cramped tail cockpit is extreme, get ready for an aircraft that decides a fuselage is entirely unnecessary. Holding the number 2 spot is the astonishing Aero-L Breezy, a machine that defines maximum exposure and absolute sensory overload. Designed in the 1960s, the Breezy utilizes a standard set of Piper wings and a reliable Continental engine pushing from the rear, maxing out at roughly 90 miles per hour. But that is where the normalcy completely stops. There is no cabin, no aluminum skin, and no floorboards. It is just a skeletal frame of welded steel tubing built purely for the raw joy of open-air flying. The pilot sits on a bare open-air seat. Often this is just a modified patio chair or a simple bucket seat, bolted directly to the very front tip of the exposed steel chassis. With absolutely no fuselage wrapping around you, nothing above your head, and a dizzying drop directly below your heavy work boots, the visual experience is absolutely mind-bending. You are thrust out into the open sky like a hood ornament on a massive flying scaffolding. You are completely exposed to the violent rush of the wind and the deafening roar of the prop behind you. Pilots describe the Breezy experience as sitting on a lawn chair strapped to a rocket at 3,000 feet. It is terrifying, exhilarating, and surprisingly cheap to build. It often requires less than $15,000 and some clever scavenging of old aircraft parts in the garage. It is the ultimate expression of fearless American DIY engineering and pure mechanical trust. But even the sheer lunacy of the Breezy pales in comparison to our final mind-boggling aircraft. It completely redefines the very shape of an airplane cockpit. Finally, claiming the #1 spot for the strangest home-built cockpit ever conceived is the unbelievable Verhees Delta. Designed by Belgian engineer Bart Verhees, this experimental marvel looks like a flying Dorito chip or a rogue piece of geometry that somehow achieved flight. It is a true tailless delta-wing aircraft powered by a small automotive-style engine. Weighing roughly 600 pounds empty, it boasts incredible structural strength and an impressive cruising speed of 170 miles per hour, despite its alien triangular appearance. The most bizarre, jaw-dropping aspect of the Verhees Delta is that it does not have a cockpit attached to the wing. Instead, the cockpit is actually built directly inside the thick wing structure itself. The pilot climbs through a bottom hatch and is entirely swallowed by the wing, sitting deep within the exact center of gravity of the aircraft. The only part of the pilot that protrudes is their head. It is enclosed in a tiny, highly aerodynamic bubble canopy situated right at the extreme leading edge of the triangle. This is the absolute peak of garage genius. It turns a radically efficient aerodynamic theory into a flying reality with just a few thousand hours of meticulous aluminum crafting. However, the sheer claustrophobia of being permanently encased inside a solid wing structure, coupled with the terrifying safety concerns of having severely restricted visibility and very limited escape options in an emergency, makes this an aircraft strictly for the bravest of engineers. It is strange, it is brilliant, and it is undeniably the most extreme DIY machine ever to take to the skies. These 10 extreme machines are not just quirky experiments. They represent the absolute peak of independent mechanical creativity and real solutions to real engineering problems. From the claustrophobic speed of the GB to the pure terrifying freedom of the Breezy, they prove that the human desire to fly knows no bounds. Which of these crazy cockpits did you find the strangest? And honestly, which one would you actually want to see in person? Let me know in the comments below. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. See you next time.